Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is Everything in Moderation, the International Edition, episode 19. Boys and girl, how are we doing today?
Great.
Doing good.
We're doing
Enjoying
good.
the
We're doing
weekend.
well.
We got we're gonna going forward. We're gonna have more people on the episode, so more opinions, more maybe more disagreements. I doubt that, but some good conversation. Everyone's gonna bring a different perspective, especially with the international issues and having the international cast speaking on some American issues too, which will be fun. So today, a lot's been going on lately. So Israel and Palestine have been a controversial topic in the news lately. So who would like to begin of what might be occurring right now?
I could. So basically, to give you a little backstory, 40 years ago, there started to become a major conflicts in Israel over certain territories in Palestine, and it's now just becoming ahead really because social media has been getting ahead of it and helping report the incidents now. So a lot of American attention, especially, is on the news here in 2020. So we all got the report. Israel attacked a major building which housed, funny enough, Al Jazeera buildings and different news organizations. They bombed an entire building complex, which resulted in, don't have the list here, 42 Palestinians dead and 10 children dead. Okay, so this happened. Think about it this way. These territories that are there, they're kind of Israeli land at this point because, Palestine hasn't been a state for a long time, really. It's just more ethnicity at this point within Israel. So would you expect this to happen in any of America? It's like if we were to be like, okay, the Native Americans, they're causing some trouble. They're shooting like bombs over at cornfields. Do we go and blow up an entire building in the Native American area? Because that is the American equivalent of what's happening in Israel. So it's just a very interesting dynamic, especially for a heavily Jewish community, since what happened with the Holocaust. I don't know why they're doing what's going on in Israel, but there's a reason for the conflict and the tensions between the Palestinians and the Israelites, and I would say it's mostly caused by Israel and their treatment of Palestinians.
I think that's a pretty accurate assessment of what's going on. Basically, I saw like a comment that said that it's like a fully trained military versus people with stones. And then
military backed up by the best military in the world.
Go Stoners.
We're going to get to that because America loves Israel. So we'll discuss about, let's get into it right now. Eric, what do you think America should be doing right now?
Listen, all my opinions on war are derived strictly from the latest Call of Duty game, and they didn't get there yet. This is too modern for me. They're in Cold War. I'm waiting for the new version. But realistically, I don't think America should be involved in it. Let them fight their own wars. Let them figure it out. If we keep trying to step in, they're just going to keep fighting because we're just going to prolong it like it always happens. We should just stay out.
So I agree that just the only issue with that is that we fund Israel like $300 billion.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what he means is, don't fully, or I could be mistaken, but don't fully engage in it. I think it's important to have a stance or at least a statement from, President Biden, also certain members, certain politicians rather, but to at least have some sort of stance. But I think a lot of it is already shown just where we're funding. We fund Israel. And why we fund Israel is because they have certain things that we agree with, and they have the same enemies that we do. Those are common, that's a common theme. So of course we're not going to engage with the military and cause war. But I think another question is, why is this continuing? Why are innocent people being attacked? Like, what initiated it? I think we should look at that as well.
Patrick, just real quick to bring up, you brought up a good point, right? And I was talking to like a military officer about this because I'm friends with him in another Discord with games I play. I said, why would the U.S. military support Israel for this fact? Do they really have like that good diplomatic standing with them? And they said, yes, they are a very important ally because they allow us to have military bases in an extremely strategic area of the world. So if you're looking at it from American government perspective, they're going to side with the relatively neoliberal nation. Like they're not too like out there, like when times of rhetoric, at least Israel. But when you look at their actions, what's going on with it, it's pretty extreme. So that's I would have to say is a very interesting thing to see is Americans, at least now, are okay with neoliberal nations like Israel to be doing whatever they want to do, pretty much. I mean, we see it now. I mean, we said something when, Hitler came up and started doing ethnic cleansing. This isn't the same type of ethnic cleansing. However, I would say 1000%, that's totally different from the kind that's going on here, but it's still not okay. I mean, we weren't okay with it back in, what was happening in our times in America with Martin Luther King and how they had people, certain Black people go to certain areas like suburbs and not suburbs, urban areas and very low income housing, how it happened in America through law. But it's just a different concept. And, I definitely think Israel in general is taking a very militant approach to this.
I think that's one of the issues too, is that Israel kind of moves the Palestinian population like over within time. So like, I don't know if you guys like saw the video, but there was like Jewish settlers going into like a Palestinian's like backyard or whatever and like starting to like dig shit up.
Yeah,
and
I see that.
And they're like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, we've been neighbors forever. It's like, no, this is my house now.
I have to tell in the video. It's like, I have to take it. You don't understand. I have to steal this from you. Like, I was what the hell is this logic?
We did that to the Native Americans only a couple hundred years ago too. So.
America's
pretty fond of that, so I see why we're on their side now.
I mean, it was quite a long time ago, and Jackson was a pretty different kind of person. But I don't know. I don't think it's that black and white at all. And I remember in 2000. Well, I don't remember from the time I was alive then because I was 5, but I believe in 2005 they were making certain attempts to pull out of Gaza. And second, if you look at a huge military action, it's one because they have that capacity. They're funded by the U.S., and their defense system is impeccable. And one of the main reasons is because they're pretty much antagonized, or the other way around, by the rest of the Middle East. The majority of them, they're the outlier there, and they have walls and all these things to defend themselves. And there are two arguments to it. It's one, they're killing innocent lives, and no one supports that. But it's also difficult when there is terrorist threat there as well. There's Hamas, so that's another thing we should take into account.
I think that's a great point, Patrick, because of where Israel is situated in geographical terms. They are just on edge 100% of the time because it could go south real quick. So when Hamas sends 2 rockets, they reply with 20. It's because like they're very on edge, and it causes them to retaliate with like extreme force because they don't want they're trying to deter everyone else. But that's the thing. And Hamas obviously is one of the major presences in Gaza. And I was thinking about this. I was like, why would Hamas want to, when they shoot rockets at Israel? I mean, I guess this turns into like a who shot who first kind of ordeal. But hypothetically, let's just say that Hamas shoots a rocket at Israel, right? Why would they do that when they know that Israel's going to shoot back as many as like them times 7? And it got me thinking, a terrorist organization wanting retaliation from the Israeli government to recruit more people for the terrorist organization. It's terrorism 101. And it's the reason why when like us being in the Middle East for so long in drone strikes and everything, we created more terrorists just by doing that because technology is not perfect. It's not. And again, you don't want to endanger your own soldiers. And even that could, lead to some trouble.
Add one more thing to that. Where is Hamas shooting from? Like, where are they located? I was looking at some videos that they don't always show in the news, but one important aspect is where are they shooting the missiles from? Because it's not that, I don't believe that Israel is just shooting at civilians like, oh, we don't like them, they're a different ethnicity. It's not. I think it's more, the approach is more civil than it's been a while back, because there's been this, this back and forth for a while. But Hamas is literally shooting in a civilian area.
Yeah.
And they're shooting at a very highly defensed place in Israel. Israel has great defenses, like this Iron Dome, what you would call it. But the only way to stop them from shooting is to shoot there. So I doubt Israel is like, oh yes, we love to do this. We get a bloodthirst out of it. No, it's terrible. And I think that's why this situation is very gray, and it's very, and that there are two sides to it. People
Patrick,
are dying.
Just real quick, just to go bounce off your point, I think it's really important to understand what it is from frame of a Palestinian citizen. So let me just go over certain things when it comes to being a Palestinian citizen in Israel. So first of all, where you are in the nation, if you would ever bring up a map of like Israel, Palestinians have two options really. They could be kind of in the middle of Israel, and there's like different settlements, or you could be on the Gaza Strip, and we all know what the Gaza Strip's like, right? So you don't really got too many options, right? And you can't travel in between there, because as a Palestinian, you actually have a certain driver's plate, and you can't travel between those areas. You're restricted by the Israeli government from doing so. And they do that mostly so they can't visit in between the Gaza Strip and just because of what's going on there. But it definitely is an important factor for Israel life. You'll see there's the West Bank and Gaza Strip. That's pretty much there. And when you look at the actual road maps too, you can only go in certain areas. So even the West Bank itself is split up a lot of the portion between where you can live. So they control basically their entire movement, and they can't even leave either. I mean, they can get exiled. That's pretty much it. That's your options there. Now, what is the quality of life for Palestinians versus Israel or Israelis? So if you were to look at the UN's amount of water you need per day to live a healthy, pretty good life, you need, I think it's 100 gallons a day, and that includes washing, shower, and other things as well. Now, the Israeli people have 200. They have more than enough, right? Now, can you guess what the Palestinians have? They have just below the margin. They are at 70 gallons a day. So, that isn't a humanitarian crisis by any means, but, you're starting to see like the difference between those two groups. Now, if you look directly in, Israel itself, what's happening there, I mean, they're literally evicting Palestinians. They're literally evicting them from their like areas. And if you are a Palestinian business owner, you are now getting like riots and random happenings coming to your stores just because you are a Palestinian. Now, I'm not gonna, run around the circle and not say that this is literally apartheid part 2, Electric Boogaloo, but it definitely is there. It's definitely is comparable to what's happening in South Africa. So I would say, seeing a radical movement, especially terrorist groups coming out of this, is not uncommon at all. I mean, you've seen it even in America's sense. We've seen Malcolm X and what's happened with the Black Panthers. And then, we've literally seen our nation do what's happening in Israel to Chicago, of any place. Like perfect place for that to happen, right? So you have to realize that, like, when these things happen, right? You look around history and see what's been going on. Now, one thing I want to point out is every single time like these events have ended, especially in the United States and India, for example, right? You've had a leader bring up a peaceful resolution to the government and solve their problems through diplomacy and trying to get more into the government and more involved and more the major populace of the state to get involved in going together and being good. But it's weird in Israel, and I'm not sure if you're going to see that or anything like that happen.
So Eric put a question in the chat. Is this kind of an unwinnable war from Palestine's perspective? If I could just take a crack at it, I would say yes. It's just that, like, I honestly, Danny mentioned a peaceful resolution, right? And do I think that that could happen? I'm gonna probably say no. And when you look at it, and you just look at what Israel has and what Palestine and Hamas have, it's just there's going to be one clear winner if there's an all-out assault. So obviously, it's in Palestine's best interest to not fight Israel, but Israel is overbearing in the sense that it's scaling up its assault at a slow rate. So like it's not like, because if they just literally just got troops, right, and they just stormed wherever, like they stormed Gaza, they stormed the West Bank or something, that's going to cause a lot of eyebrows to raise and make Israel get in trouble with some of their allies, because it's like, all right, listen, like you're putting us in a position where technically, yes, we should help you, but you're also just slaughtering like random civilians.
Does Palestine have any like allies like that, or not really?
Palestine's not a state. That's the huge problem, right?
It's not
is that they don't have
recognized.
that power.
Right. And yeah, so it feels like a big part of it is a lose-lose situation for Palestine. And Danny hit on a lot of the key points, as well as Christian. Yeah, so Palestine, and also with the water, you know, if you look at SDG 6, they fall under that for the water part. They don't have the recognition by the United Nations. There's a clear side where these more liberal or more modern states are. Palestinians, they have limited choices. You join Hamas or you go to Jordan, where a lot of refugees lie. So, I mean, if we want to see a better thing occur, we need to ask, you know, what can Israel do logically that is better? What can Israel, should they like give up part of their land? Would that be benefit? Because, you know, if we're just speaking logically, would they want to? It lessens their power. Can they change something with their immigration system to bring more Palestinians in? You know, these are also important questions.
I'm just giving a rundown of UN countries that recognize.
The U.S. does or doesn't?
Doesn't.
If it did, it'd be a whole nother.
Yeah.
Then, you know, that's an important thing, right? How many countries recognize Palestine as a state? I don't think the whole time.
I saw Russia and North Korea there, which could make for some interesting things if we like fully support Israel.
Yeah. Well, okay. So this brings me to a great point. If we had a certain Donald Trump in office, I'm just saying all the Palestinians would be dead right now because Trump was very pro-Israel, even though like next week we're gonna be having a debate. Me representing paleo-conservatism and Anthony representing neo. And Trump was kind of thought to be a sort of paleo-conservative, but he's like not full. He's definitely not fully. There's certain instances where he did follow that like very strict conservative approach, but he was a very big supporter and lover of Israel. So I'm sure that he would have said some very choice words for the Palestinians in general. Like, you know, I know you can think of all the racist remarks that he could make.
I don't even think this issue would have happened if he was president. I don't even
really. Why do you think so?
I just don't think Hamas or anyone would have started this at all. You know, why?
This has been going on for a while, though. No.
Well, the specific instance, because I mean, the Palestine-Israel conflict has occurred for a while, even prior to, you know, Israel being Israel. This whole, you know, starting with ethnic divisions and stuff of that nature. So I mean, this goes back a while, but all of a sudden it's getting popular again. I wonder we're just recognizing these actions now, like other members of the public.
I would say that the reason why we haven't been because they've purposely not been reporting it, and you know why? This is a complete neoliberal stance. It's so like I know conservatives are also going to agree with it. If you look at what's going on with voting towards this type of issue, pretty much only 16 members of the House will even do anything opposing Israel. Anything. That's 16. That's most of our government are fully on board with what's going on with Israel and are giving them the thumbs up to do whatever the hell they want. So it's really not an issue between different politics or like policies because there's barely anybody for it. And the reason is because our government at this point in time is very much like Israel. We are our state. I mean, we talk about social issues all the time. We talk about trans rights all the time. And yes, that is important. Okay. It's talking about that stuff if you're into it. But, it's a part of the new neoliberal ideology is still, do some horrendous stuff in foreign policy and, maybe be a little weird in economics, not really going with the times of certain other countries. But you see, this type of stuff still happen in those kind of countries. And I guarantee you, if the rhetoric didn't change in the early 2000s, Hillary Clinton would be all for the wall like she was back then too, like Donald Trump was too, because that was their style of politics. They're the same way, and I think what happened then really shook up what happens in American neoliberal politics, where we're not so really for that anymore. But you could definitely draw comparisons between Israel and America.
So it's not even just neoliberal. I realized that, when learning, between the difference between these types of neoliberal and realism, this is the cross between neorealism and neoliberalism. I think they're almost indistinguishable at this point, because it's not just, they agree with our values. It's also a matter of that state, Israel, has the most power in doing what they do. And also them doing what they do protects us as well. It's not. So I think there is a crossover there. And that's why it makes this complicated.
So I want to share a clip of Eric's favorite person in politics.
Oh boy.
I'm sure you can only imagine.
I want to know who this is.
Oh my God.
So I came across this a couple days ago, and it validates what Danny said just a couple moments ago.
I have said to people when they ask me if this Capitol crumbles to the ground, the one thing that would remain is our commitment to our aid. And I don't even call it aid, our cooperation with Israel. That's fundamental.
Right?
What are you talking about?
Before we die, before we get like completely exploded, we'll make sure to send you that $4.3 billion on the way out, okay?
Let's get one thing straight, all right?
Let's send that on a bill supporting like schools. So
she was at an Israeli American council. So she wasn't, it's politics, optics 101. She wanted the Jewish vote. But just, I think if you could see one of our politicians, one of the most prominent ones, saying something like that, you can get the idea of where America, politics as a whole stands in this issue. So
are we supporting, I'm still kind of confused. Are we supporting Israel for like, no, it's not for moral reasons or like ethical reasons. It's just because we want their shit in the Middle East, right?
Their military bases, because we can strategically launch nuclear bombs over to Russia and China from that location. And that's coming straight out the mouth of the horse. I'm talking to like military, he's not really a general, he's a lieutenant, who's telling me all those things about like how we have bases all over the world, and like the reason why we have certain connections, especially with the ultra nationalist ones, are because of that. Is because they have strategic locations. We could fly a bomber over a certain country if we needed to. It's kind of America's hold on the world.
Yeah, that's why I believe this has actually less to do with neoliberalism at this point. Although you make a lot of good points, Danny, and why it does seem that way, and it has been that way.
Right.
But I really think when it comes to the military strategies, that is important. And this goes into a huge broad picture, not just with Palestine or Israel. It goes into other countries as well, and how we have to strategically place our navy and our military peeps around, including against China. And that's a whole different thing with Belt and Road. But this goes into a huge picture, in my opinion.
I would say, as in a vacuum, like as a taxpayer, I personally would not like to be funding the Israelites in any form of way. And I think, we should have at least a say about it. Like, I know the military, yes, they need it in certain areas, but, maybe not Israel, maybe not the Philippines. I would even say the Philippines more than Israel, because the Philippines, they just kind of go in there and kill whoever uses drugs. That's kind of a little weird to me, but just those two for me, and then you can go have military bases over the world.
I don't know. I think that area is more important than some other places. But again, I don't like taxes at all, or taxpayer stuff at all. It's really the libertarian in me, but
yeah, exactly.
I don't
that's a libertarian in me too. I don't want the government going in and I don't want to be paying for that. And there's a lot of things that I don't want to be paying for, in fact, in the government. But
I think that this raises up a decent point too, because for the people that are saying that America should help Palestine, right? But then these same people are the same people that say raise minimum wage, better healthcare, everything. Take your pick, friend. Do you want America to be better and for America to develop its nation back to where it needs to be? And because it's just, obviously right now due to Corona and everything, it's not been a great time. And Eric is very passionate about social safety nets and stuff. So this money that we are funding Israel with could very easily be used to pay for a lot of these social safety nets.
Yeah, I just want to take a step back for a second. My actual favorite guy in politics, Andrew Yang, who has an interesting stance on this, which we're not going to talk about right now. But his idea was you should have a say in a certain percentage of what your tax dollars go to, and we should also make tax day a national holiday. And the government basically tells us what they worked on last year with the tax money and what they plan on doing in the future. So it helps us kind of decide how to distribute what. So it's kind of more fair where because you guys are saying, I kind of agree, we shouldn't be giving our money just so that Israel can bomb Palestine. We should be doing it for things that we're passionate about and things that we actually want.
And I would say that the majority of the population does not want to fund Israel or any other foreign countries unless there is some economic ties to the country.
We have no idea how many different countries we're funding on bills that have nothing to do with funding those countries. And it's true. I mean, there was I think on the COVID bill, it's a huge bill. It has things like funding Guatemala and all these other places for, I don't know what reasons. And it's insane. It's also a lot of germane stuff that we just don't even see. The amount it just goes, it's ridiculous. It drives me insane.
And this goes into a decent example of countries that do pay high taxes. Example, Norway. We've talked about Norway on the podcast a numerous amount of times. Norwegians don't mind paying high taxes because they know that their taxes are funding things that they want: free college, free healthcare. This is all, so they don't mind paying the extra tax, or just in general having a higher cost of living than a lot of other European countries, because they're seeing their tax dollars at work. So that's sort of what, I think everyone on this podcast could probably say, we'd appreciate taxes more if we saw it going towards the things that we actually like. So Andrew Yang saying that the tax day should be a national holiday, and we should have a say of what we are able to give our taxes to. Eric, though, I have a question about that. Is it what you personally want to give your taxes to, or what the majority of the United States wants to give their taxes to?
he proposed that like a certain percentage of the taxes that you personally pay, you can like put into certain like categories.
Okay.
That's cool. Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
But what about like just, I mean, I guess this wouldn't happen because there are definitely going to be people that are going to be paying taxes that would fit this category. But like agriculture, for example, people around here are not really thinking too much about farmers. Like, again, the farmers would pay their own tax and then it would go towards their farming. But obviously, farming is important; it feeds us. But how would we know that we wouldn't overlook certain industries like that are still important, but they just don't see the limelight?
I mean, we probably would, but that's why it's just a percentage. It's not going to be the full 100%.
Got it.
But I don't know. That still might not be enough. I'm not a tax expert. Not a tax guy.
Gotta get your brother on here.
Yeah, literally.
I think to add to that, you have to. This is getting off the Palestine-Israel part, but I think with Yang's proposal there, it also has to go into implementing more things of that nature into public schools and education, knowing all that stuff. So, which would help because there are so many things that would be overlooked.
And speaking of Andrew Yang, Eric did mention his statement. Caught a lot of flack for that because he was I think he supported Israel, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they got to. You know, it's almost like political suicide at this point if you don't. It's very hard not to, and you'll alienate a lot of people if you do. And you know,
but socialists got pissed.
Yeah, well, certain ones do. You know, and one thing I want to bring up before we end here is one thing that the IDF has been pushing this entire time. I've been talking about this, and you'll probably hear it when people bring this up. They'll start saying, "What about the one-state solution?" Right? What if they make their state completely unified and they do this? Where would these people go? It's what's happening right now. It's exactly what's happening. These people are being put into the equivalent of open air prisons, where you survive off a stipend and whatever you work, you're working in poverty, and it just sucks. Absolutely sucks. And you could really compare it almost to what's going on in China. And I don't think a lot of well-developed countries are doing this. I'm starting to see a trend now where people are using like labor forces like this in their countries to do stuff. I'm not really keen on it either, and I don't want to be supporting it. So I would say watch out when people start talking about that, because you got to look at the dynamics the Palestinians live in, and if it doesn't meet the same standards as you and I and anybody in the United States, you got to look at it at that point of view. You know what I mean?
Right. I think the vast majorities of countries don't live the way that we do either, though. So,
I think that's a major point that people are missing here too. Is like it's not America over there. It's not like if you forcefully move people out of their homes, it's against the law. It might be looked down upon on the international stage, but you could pretty much say it's the Wild West out there. Anything really goes. And that's why a lot of nations carefully pay attention to it, because there are a lot of humanitarian issues that can occur and do occur in the Middle East. So that's why it's important that America monitors this from afar, I think, because genuinely, like, I think that if anyone could have some sort of influence on saying like, hey, Israel, you want to scale it back a little bit, it would be us, because obviously if they lost our backing, that would be detrimental to their whole economy and
whole country.
Yes.
They would be in a lot of trouble because we supply them with ready new weapons too.
Well, let's also not take away from, because I feel like it's easy to say, Palestine or Israel, one's good and one's bad. But let's just look at the people themselves, the society. I think Israel has done an amazing job societally. They have assimilated and brought in immigrants from all over ethnicities. They accept all these religions and allow these things to occur, which are the good things that the U.S. has to back it with. So there are good things there, and the Palestinians, they go through so much as well. But then they also have Hamas there, which makes them look like the bad guys a lot too. So this is personally for me why it's very gray, not black and white, and there are certain things to support and certain things to be like, that is bad. So
I think that's one of the major things that people need to understand. It's not Islamophobic if you say, well, listen, like Israel can do this, and it's not being anti-Semitic if you're saying, hey, listen, Palestine could do this to you if you do it to them, you know. So, listen, it's just it's international politics. A lot of people don't understand that, and that's why we have these episodes to kind of see why the culture affects different issues in a very different way than it would here, because it's a little more I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's a little more calm here. But
it's much more calm here.
Yes, it may not seem it, but when you look outside of here, you see that there are a lot of other countries that are seeing some very important issues going on. But that is all from us this week. Hope everyone enjoys the new format. I think it's going to be a good one. It's good to have the different thoughts and opinions. So we will see you all next week. Thank you, everybody, and have a good weekend.
See you all later.
Thank you all. Great seeing you, Eric, as well. Oh, he's gone. Okay.